In chapter 4, the book introduces second declension neuter nouns. And really, they're very similar to second declension masculine nouns that we learned in chapter 3. But these are going to be words like, war, that are bellum, belly, neuter. As you notice, they still have that characteristic I. Our ending here is in a US or ER, so that's a little bit different. And they're obviously going to be neuter, okay, but they're still second declension. And just getting right into it, there's something that I'm going to call neuter law. The book really doesn't, call it that, and other teachers don't really refer to it that way. But here's how it really works out, and this is true for any neuter noun. And there are neuter nouns in the second declension, third declension, and fourth declension. So we're going to be seeing this as we keep going, and it's kind of an important thing to know. This rule still applies, and for any word that is second declension or third declension or fourth declension but neuter, this is the only change. Nothing else changes besides what is changed by neuter law. So the declension chart is exactly the same. So if we look here, for any neuter noun, they're going to have the same forms in the nominative, the accusative, and the vocative. And the plural of those, the plural nominative, accusative, and vocative, will end in A instead of whatever ending there's already in the declension chart. Okay, so if we look at the second declension neuter chart, as it's already kind of filled out here, everything is the same except our nominative, accusative, and vocative. You still have I, O, O, orum, is, and is. Neuter nominative in the second declension is going to be a okay, like basium, bellum, concilium, concilii, and there. And the vocative, instead of being that E, ER, or I, is simply just again. Plural, we would expect I, orum, is, os, I, and based on neuter law, the plural nominative, accusative, and vocative end in an A. And so here we go. And that's the only places that the neuter chart is different. We have a here, we have a and then we have A, and A. And this neuter law is really the only thing that tweaks it. If you notice and compare your charts, the second declension neuter chart is exactly the same as the second masculine chart besides these places, right? Even our accusative, our accusative singular form is the same between the two, even though technically this is, the same as the nominative or vocative. So this should be relatively easy to grasp as far as forming it and using this chart. Really, these are the only endings, and this is an important instance of knowing the gender of your words and knowing the declension of those words, so that you can effectively use the right chart, and so that you know that a here, if a word is neuter, could be your nominative form. It's not just your accusative. Or that an A, if we had wars, that's plural. And if we had girl, that's the same A, all right, but this is singular, because this is first declension and this is second neuter. So an important thing to realize is knowing your gender and knowing what declension a word belongs to is going to start becoming super important. Moving on. The other thing, the major thing that's introduced in this chapter is the verb to be. Sum esse fui futurum, to be. And if you notice there, none of the forms really follow a pattern. And this is true in almost any language. The verb to be is irregular, meaning that its forms don't follow whatever pattern we would expect. If we took a verb in English, like to love, we would say I love, you love, he, she, or it loves, we love, you love, they love. There's only one form that changes there, loves, right? And that's what makes it hard. We need to have our pronouns there to get our meaning. And in English, if we did the same thing with the verb to be, you'll notice that the form really doesn't follow that pattern. We wouldn't say to be and then say I be, right? We would say I am. And it's not you be or you am, it's you are. And it's he, she, or it, not be, am, or are, but he, she, or it is. and then we'd have we are, you are, and they are. So if you notice here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different forms for a verb in the English form, whereas in typical verbs we only have 2 forms, and that like love and then loves. Right? So this is irregular. In Latin, it's the same thing. It doesn't necessarily follow a pattern. And here are your forms. So if we wanted to say I am, right, in Latin, it's just sum. You are is es. He, she, or it is est. We are is sumus. You, plural, are estis. And they are sunt. Okay? And if you notice, you still have your O or M, your S, your T, a mus, tis, and NT. Still those personal endings. It's really just that the stem is changing, which makes it kind of weird. Okay, but this is the only form that we need. Okay, in Latin. In English, we need, still our pronouns, and we're changing that. Whereas in Latin, sum is simply just I am, or sumus, we are. Okay. You do need to know this chart. This chart is super important, and it's going to show up a ton. I would suggest having this written down. But the verb to be, sum, is what's called a linking verb. You can almost think of this as an equal sign. Okay? And what does that mean? It means that it's linking something on one side of it to the other side of it. Essentially linking a noun with either another noun or with an adjective. So in this first sentence here, Vergilius est poeta, which would just translate as to Virgil, which can be spelled with an E or an I there, in English, is the poet, or is a poet. Really what this is saying is just Virgil equals the poet. Same thing here, we have a mus ending, so our subject is really we. We could add it, but we don't need to. And then, we are Roman, or we are Romans. Again, we equal Roman. And this is the idea of a linking verb. So it's going to work the same way in English as it does in Latin. And the last thing here are substantive adjectives. And what a substantive adjective is, think of the word like substance, right? These are adjectives that are used alone with no noun. And we do this in English all the time. Think of like The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead. An adjective, dead, is standing in place of something like dead people, dead things, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay? Again, good, bad, ugly. All of those are adjectives, but they're standing in place of something like the good people, the good men, the bad men, the ugly men. And realistically, you might need to supply in English something like man, woman, or things, just depending on the gender and number. Obviously, if it's masculine, you want to say man or men. Feminine, probably women or women. And if it's neuter, use things or thing. That's going to be used a lot. If the noun or if the adjective is neuter, you're going to want to put things there, right? So if we said something like multi, sunt, stulti, we just have many. Like if we just translated this the way it shows up, we have many are foolish. The idea being that many, men, because this is nominative here and masculine, many men are foolish is the implied meaning. But many are foolish, that makes sense to us. Okay? If we said amat bona, T ending would be, he, she, or it. He loves, and then he loves good. And that's all we have, bona, right? Because this is neuter and plural, we might want to say, he loves good things, because it's neuter. And the Romans will do this a ton, where they just make something neuter, and nominative or accusative, plural, and it's meaning the word things in English. So he loves, there we go, good things. We're going to see these a lot. You'll see these in the practice too. But when you're seeing an adjective by itself, with no word that's going with it, it's probably one of these substantive adjectives.